to the broken and to the hurting, to the desperate and to the defeated, to the common, the average, the plain and the small. I want you to know you matter to God. To the washed up and the worn out, to the helpless and the hopeless, to the cast outs, the dropouts, the last picks and hypocrites, to the unimpressive and the underwhelming, to the nobodies and has-beens, to people just like me. You matter to God. You are not defined by your worst days or your biggest mistakes. And you are not the sum total of all your setbacks, slip-ups, failures, and faults. Because who you are is not determined by what you have, where you've been, or what you've done, but who Jesus declares you to be. You matter to God. Maybe at some point somebody told you something that simply wasn't true. That you're nothing but unworthy, unwanted, and unloved. But I want the loudest voice in your ear to be the voice that breaks the cedars and shakes the wilderness, and he says, you matter to me. Before the galaxies were born, or the first star gave light, before the ocean waves crashed or the night sky cracked with thunder, before any creature crawled or any bird sang, before the planets were set in motion, he set in motion the plan of your salvation. From the highest heights of heaven, the Lord of all creation looked upon your desperation. He became like one of us to remake all of us, to make an orphan his child, to make a rebel his friend, to set the prisoner free. You matter to God. So to all the sons and daughters of God, to all my brothers and sisters in Christ, behold his power and glory and majesty. Behold the one who matters most.
Yes, you matter. No matter who you are, no matter where you've gone, no matter what's going on in your life, you matter. We've been talking about winning the day, and we've on step number 3. We were talking about in the very first one, where we were talking about flipping the script, and that is changing from all of the negative thoughts that are constantly bombarding in your life and everything else, changing those to positive thoughts. Because most of our life is basically nothing but Satan putting negativity in there. Last week, we talked about kissing the wave, which basically says in order to accomplish anything, ladies and gentlemen, you got to get out of the boat. There are sometimes you've got to take that first step out of the boat to walk on water. Because Jesus did, and so can we. And so today, we're going to give you another one. And that is to understand that almost anybody can accomplish anything if they work at it long enough, hard enough, and smart enough. And sometimes we think, well, man, is this the psychology of thinking nothing but good thoughts and all of this stuff? No, that's not what it is. I want to show you this is what God says that we can do. A long time ago, back in the 1970s, there was a young guy by the name of Bob Specka. Bob Specka was actually a sophomore in the 1970s at a little place called Marple Newton High School. He was in a math class, and his teacher was teaching him a thing called math induction theory. His name was Mr. Dombrowski. And he likened this theory of math induction theory, he likened it to like the domino effect, okay? And so what ended up happening was that Bob Specka became so involved with listening to this domino effect that what he did was he went out right after school and he bought 2 boxes of dominoes. 66 apiece, so he had 112 dominoes. So what Bob Specka did was he set the dominoes all up, one by one. And he hit the first one. And guess what happened? They all started tumbling over. And he did this. Well, after graduating from high school, Johnny Carson had heard about Bob Specka and his domino effect. And so he invited him onto the Tonight Show. to show him his toppling skills. So he started making some things and everything. And so the next thing you know, the Guinness Book of World Records created a place just for dominoes, to see how many dominoes you could set up and knock down. Well, Bob Specka, he set the first world record for topping the chain reaction with 11,111. He set it up, knocked over one, and they all fell. So over the next 10 years, he broke his record 5 times. The last one was 97,500 dominoes that he set up, pushed one, and knocked over everything. And so what happened was that at the same time, there was a very smart guy who said, well, if I could take these dominoes and if I could do something with them, here's what I could do. If they're capable, he took one domino and he said, if I take that domino and it would knock it over 1.5 times its size, it would continue to expand. So a 2-inch domino could topple over a 3-inch domino. A 3-inch domino could go ahead and knock over a 4.5-inch domino, and so forth. But here's what he got to. By the time you got to the 80th domino, you could actually topple the Leaning Tower of Pisa. The 21st domino could take down the Washington Monument. The 23rd domino could knock over the Eiffel Tower, and so forth and so on. So what you end up finding is this, that in Genesis chapter 11 and verse number 6 really explains this domino effect. And here's what the Bible says. The Lord said, if they have begun to do this as one people, all having the same language, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. You know what he was talking about? The Tower of Babel. If all of them came together as one people and they began to speak the same, then nothing they planned to do would be impossible for them. Think about that. We looked at it as the Tower of Babel as a very negative effect. But think about this, if the church of the living God would begin to speak with the same language and the same desire and the same focus, there is nothing that could stop them. Nothing. They could go. And so basically, what God was saying, that almost anyone can accomplish almost anything if they work at it long enough, hard enough, and smart enough. The problem is we're not working smart enough. There's something going on that's kind of falling under the radar that many people do not know. What happened was, a few years ago, radio began to change. You started, it came out and people started listening to it, and they would play records and everybody would try to get their records play and get excited about it and everything. And then all of a sudden, it went from a format of playing music to more or less conversations that were going on. And then what ended up happening was that then it began into talk radio. A few years ago, a gentleman bought out a radio station that was called Mamba, which was basically a Spanish station. And the reason that they bought it out was because there was a couple of very conservative radio talk hosts on the radio station, and they bought it out. And so what ended up happening was, when they bought it out, they took and canceled that conservative Spanish-speaking individual. Well, right now, all of a sudden, there were people that were beginning to speak, and they were getting very well, a lot of following. Some of them were people that you probably have heard, Rush Limbaugh, who has now gone home, Sean Hannity, other people that were conservative talk show hosts. And what happened was they were given certain radio stations, and all of a sudden people were beginning to cancel them, saying, if you continue to allow this person on the radio, then we're no longer going to buy your products as sponsors. And so they ended up taking them off. And so what they ended up doing was they ended up developing a radio series of radio stations, and the radio broadcasting was called Odyssey. And they all started going under this, and they all started broadcasting, and all of a sudden now, conservative talk show radio is going everywhere. And they are trying to censor this. And there's a gentleman that a lot of people don't hear much about, but a guy by the name of George Soros, who is flying under the radar and is going to buy out Odyssey. And they are recommending that they go ahead and let him buy it out. And as soon as he does, what you will find out is all conservative talk show hosts, talk show stars will no longer be on your radio stations. They will all be canned. Why? Because they want one thing. This gentleman is one of the richest, if not the richest man in the whole world. If you think you can do anything, you can. He is the one that decided that I cannot win the presidency, so what I need to do, and this isn't a political thing, this is trying to show you something that's going on and what is happening, okay? Because it's filtering down. He said, here's what I'll do. I can't take all my money and put it into a campaign for president. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start at the lower level. I'm going to start with these mayor races that nobody's paying any attention to. And what I'll do is I'll put about $10,000, $15,000 into that race, and I'll get this person in there as our candidates. Then we'll go on up from there to the county commissioners. We'll go to the county boards. But then what we'll do is we'll go on up into the county leaders. Then we'll go from the county leaders, we'll go to the state leaders. This is why you're seeing a lot of these attorney generals in the states are very politically leaning, if I can use this. Supreme Court came out with a ruling that basically said that no longer can these administrative groups like the Federal Election Committee, the Federal Communication Committee, and NIS and NSHA and all of these cannot take an ambiguous law and just start making their own laws because they're not elected officials. And they've been building all these people in there to basically take away everything that we have. This is where, remember they took out the 10 Commandments out of the schools? They took out the Bible out of schools. They took out Jesus out of schools. They took prayer out of schools and stuff. And now a couple of states have stood up and said, no more. We're putting the 10 Commandments back in the schools. And they're saying that's a separation of church and state. The Constitution doesn't say that. What it says is that the state cannot make a federal religion for anybody to follow as a United States. So the United States cannot tell everybody they have to be Baptist. They cannot tell everybody they have to be Catholic. They can't have a national religion. That's what it means, okay? But it doesn't mean that the state can run the church, which they are doing, and they're doing more and more of. They're taking away the tax-exempt status, which basically says your money that you've already paid taxes on, which you now give to the church, will now be taxed again. Because we've got to get money so we can spend more money to pay this. And so what's happening is this. We've got to learn to eat the frog. Doesn't sound appealing. But this frog has got to be banished and gone away with. And what we've got to learn is this. Do you know that 45% of everything you do every day is by habit? Almost half of everything you do every day is out of habit. And what ends up happening is that we think about, well, that's a bad thing. No, it isn't. Habit is a God thing. God has told us about habits. Because God's telling us that I get upset with my wife because she has certain ways that she does everything, okay? And I sometimes I say, oh, but you could do this so much easier. No, she couldn't. Because if she tried to do it out of order, she would forget. Or it would not seem right for her. For me, my habit would be something different. And every once in a while, what I try to do is tell her, here, try my way. And it doesn't work. Because that works for me. My habits work for me. You find out what habits work for you. And God is trying to teach us all that habits are good. Because what happens is when we start forming habits, good habits, they become second nature to us. And a lot of times what it is, we just do it without a thought. And when we do this, we learn how to take and tear apart these habits and find out what is good about them, the things that are there. You can take and study people. But what we need, and you can take their habits and just try to hack into them and everything. But a great leader isn't about leading other people. A great leader is someone who learns how to develop self-leadership in their self. It is very difficult to try to lead a group of other people when you can't even lead yourself. So when you learn to lead yourself and develop these habits that we're going to talk about out of God's Word, we'll find out what it is that God's trying to tell us. There was a letter that I picked up to give you an illustration. It was a high school principal. And this high school principal read a book called The Circle Maker. He weighed 397 pounds. And what he wanted to do was he decided, I want to lose weight, but what I really want to do is I want to run a marathon. And there is no way that I can run a marathon at 397 pounds. He says physically I cannot do this. It would be total disaster. So here's what he did. He decided that I have to lose at least 60 pounds before he could even start running. So he set a goal. I'll start running and practicing for this marathon when I reach 337 pounds. But somehow I've got to lose the 60 pounds. So what he decided to do was this. He was a superintendent, or he was a high school principal, and he looked, there were 82 schools in the school district that he was a part of. So what he started doing was this. I'm going to every one of those schools, and I'm going to do a prayer circle around each of those 82 schools. He started with 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. And by the time he got up to the 82nd one, he was able to run a marathon around the schools. Not only was he able to run the marathon, but he had also lost half of his body weight. He wanted to lose 60 pounds. And instead of losing 60 pounds, he lost 180 pounds by running prayer circles. And what some people were saying was, okay, so this is one of those self-help things. No, this isn't. What this is talking about is this. A good steward makes the most of their time. And this is what God is trying to tell us. A lot of the habits that we have in our life waste our time. If I have to sit here, my wife, I walk in there, and when I see this, I look at this and I think, what in the world first time I saw this, I thought, what in the world are you doing? Okay? I look at all of the makeup, and then now she has this thing that every day, right, you paint one nail or 2 nails. Okay. Every day she paints 2 of her nails a different color. And I'm sitting there thinking, why don't you just paint them all the same? No, that's not what she wants to do. Because if I paint them all the same, then I've got to spend all this time at one sitting to paint them all. So she paints just 2 because she wants all of her nails different. It's not my way of doing it because I wouldn't do that, but that's okay. She does. So she paints all of her nails. She puts on all of her makeup that she has laid out. She's got it all in drawers, and she knows exactly, and she'll pick it out. Today it's number 7 or number 8 or whatever. I don't know what the number is, and I don't even ask anymore. Okay? It's just, that's the way she does it. Why? Because she doesn't have to put any decision, do I want pink today or purple today? I just pick number 7. 7 this, 7 this, 7 this, and that's what I use today. You know what happens? It saves a lot more time. Because if she was to sit there and do my way of doing it, well, today I'm going to wear all blue or black or whatever, and as you can tell, I am not a color coordinated person. Okay? That color coordination is not myself. Blue goes with black. My wife will tell me, no, it doesn't. Okay? Blue does not go with black. If you hit me, I'm black and blue. That matches. So that's my theory of how this goes. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is this, that sometimes when we get into these habits, somebody may think that they're crazy, they're stupid, they're whatever. But what we find out is, hold on a minute, I am a good steward of my time by doing this. And if I'm a good steward of my time, leave me alone. Because that's what God is asking me to do, is to be a good steward of my time. And so many times what we do is we aren't good stewards of our time. And so what ends up getting left out or what gets the leftover is God. Because we become so preoccupied with, I've got my to-do list that I've got to do today. And guess generally what is not on the top of my do list? God. Do me a favor tomorrow. Do a to-do list. And tell me what's the first thing on your to-do list. I have a doctor's appointment. I've got to go to the grocery store. I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. Where's prayer? Oh, I forgot. If I get time, let me tell you, you won't get time. It will just slip out of your fingers and fall to the ground. And most of the time, when it falls to the ground, it's face down. And you forget about it. But God told us there are some things that we need to understand. And that is this. You need to learn how to, if I can use this word, you need to learn how to hack your habits. You need how to learn to get in there and dissect those things as to what they are. They can be physical habits. They can be emotional, mental, financial, or spiritual. So, it could be that maybe what you would like to do is, I'm 70 years old and I want to do 70 sit-ups. There is no way I'm going to do that unless I make it a goal and I break that down into little manageable, measurable ways to do it. And so what we need to do is this. There are some habits that we need to do. And number one, we need to make them measurable. And so, if you were to say today, I'm going to go run a marathon. And we go and we find out the next Saturday, or I'm pretty sure that on the 4th of July, or let's do this one. On the 4th of July, Nathan's always had a hot dog eating contest, right? Y'all didn't know that? Yes. Okay. Where y'all been? Joey Chestnut is the record holder of eating hot dogs. It's in 26 minutes. I think he gets 26 minutes. And this guy ate 77 hot dogs, buns and all. Me, there ain't no way. Number one, bread is fattening and filling. Okay? And trying to eat 76 of these things. And so this year, they're not letting him, they disqualified him and they're not letting him eat for Nathan's. So you know what he did? He says, okay, here's what we'll do. There is a group of soldiers down in Texas. He's going down there and they are having a contest. And they've got 14 soldiers that are going to eat hot dogs in 26 minutes. And he has challenged them that he is going to eat more hot dogs than all 14 of them combined. I'm thinking, dude, you're nuts. There ain't no way that you're going to do this. But he's got a goal. And in understands how to do this, you've got to be able to measure this, okay? So what ends up happening is this. Whatever goal that you're going to set for yourself, you need to learn how am I going to measure that goal? For instance, if I plan on, a lot of times, first of the year, January the 1st, New Year's resolution, I'm going to read the Bible through this year from cover to cover. If that was your goal, was to start at Genesis 1:1 and go all the way through Revelation 22:21, if you want to go all the way to the end, you can get a Bible reading plan that will have all 365 days, and it will tell you exactly how many verses you need to read on each one of those days. Okay, let's just say chapters, because chapters makes it sound a little bit easier until you understand that on one day you're not reading Psalms 119, you're reading Psalms 119 verses 1 through 78. You're not reading all 150 verses of that one chapter, okay? Because it's too long. So to do this. And so when you look at this and you say, okay, let's break it down into chapters, it now becomes measurable. That on this day I had to read 3 chapters, and here they were, and I read those 3 chapters. And so it does. And so what happens is this. It takes that measurable goal and it turns it into, or it takes that goal and measures it in a habit that is measurable, and it now becomes a daily habit. So tomorrow when I get up, I don't have to be concerned about what am I supposed to do. I go right there it is. That's my habit. It tells me. I do it. And I know what this is. And let me say this to you. A lot of you look at yourself, a lot of us look at ourselves, and we look at our self-image and we say, you know what, I need to lose some weight. Okay? And what happens is losing weight doesn't become a habit, it's a hope. I hope I'm going to lose weight. And so what ends up happening is we start to change this and adjust this, and we get on the scales today. And today I weigh 180 pounds and 180.6 pounds. Okay? And so I adjust my eating habits. Okay? So I adjust my eating habits, but I sleep more. I get up tomorrow and I weigh 181.2. I adjusted my eating habits, and I didn't eat as much as I usually do, but I weigh more. So I go ahead and I eat less tomorrow, and I get up and I now weigh 181.6. I'm going in the opposite direction. My hopes are not doing too well. I'm going in the opposite direction, and what do I end up doing? I end up quitting. Why? I didn't change the habits that I needed to change. I needed to adjust some things in order to get that. So if I knew that I needed to change my eating habits, getting rid of Cokes and Reese Cups, and eating other things that are healthy for me, like ding dongs and milk. I put milk in there, okay. That's good for you. Orange juice. Okay? That ain't going to work because chocolate does not go with orange juice. Trust me, I tried. It's not good. But unless I change my eating habits as well as exercising and something else and let that become my habit, I'm not going to lose weight. And some days I'm not going to lose some. Because something may have happened that day. But if I continue that habit, eventually it'll start happening. My body will learn to adjust and do the things that are there. And so what we need to understand is this. If I'm going to do this, I need to start adding a timeline, and I also need to start a deadline. If I want to set up the habit of praying every day, and I set up a timeline that says, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this first thing in the morning as soon as I get up. So when that alarm clock goes off, the first thing I do is I get up and I may go to the bathroom, but as soon as I take care of all that stuff, I'm going to start reading. And I set a deadline that says within 7 days, this is how my day is going to start. And by the time I get to that 7th day, I've got a habit. And on the 8th day, it becomes easy. And the 9th day, and the 10th, and the 11th. And then what ends up happening is I no longer really have to think about it because the habit is there and it's going. It's just occurring. And this is how we begin to start learning how to eat a frog. If you were to try to eat a frog right now, if I had a frog in here that was still alive and I gave it to you and told you to put it in your mouth and eat it, you try to eat that slimy thing and everything and all this stuff, you would just get sick, right? But if you learned how to eat that frog one piece at a time, some of y'all eat frog legs, right? Yeah, Well, I didn't say alive. I'm saying you don't eat the frog alive. You got to learn how to eat the frog. If you try to eat a frog alive, you ain't going to eat a frog. You'll never eat a frog. But if you learn how to kill the frog, cook the frog, and whatever you need to do to make it taste good, then you've learned how to eat the frog. It becomes a habit. But you can't do it if all you do is catch the frog and stick it in your mouth. Okay? And that's what we try to do with some of the things to change our lives. I wanted to develop a prayer life, so I'm just going to go right in there and do it. And it doesn't happen because we get frustrated. And so we've got to make it measurable. Number 2, we've got to make it meaningful, okay? It was like my dad, growing up, he started smoking cigarettes and went from cigarettes to pipe. And he would always smoke a pipe. And in that pipe he had cherry blend tobacco, okay? And then he would do that. My mom was a chain smoker. The problem is this: what got smoked was the cigarette, because my mom had a cigarette in her mouth all the time, always lit. She would be in the kitchen cooking with a cigarette in her mouth and lit. Okay, I don't know if she ever took one puff off that cigarette. And then it would burn down and she would have another one. And she was just a chain smoker. But eventually my mom had to quit. It was hard to go from a chain smoker to not do that. And that's the same way with our habits that we have. Sometimes it's just something that does and continues to drive. And sometimes what we need to do is look at those habits, and we've got to look at it and say, okay, if I get rid of this habit, can it be a blessing? For when we were talking about giving something up for fasting, I gave up chocolate, okay? I've had some, but not as much as I used to have, okay? I'm sorry. After the fast, yes. I fasted for a week, not one day or not 1 hour. It was for a week. And at the end of the week, I really didn't crave any. Okay? It was just the other day I was driving and I said, you know what? Man, I haven't had a Reese cup lately. So cool. So I walk in there and they had white Reese cups. Awesome. Better than chocolate. White chocolate is great, Mia. Really good. And I thought, they have king-size Reese cups. Let's see. White chocolate, king size, 4 of them. Oh, they have a super king size. That's 6 of them. Not yet. Not yet. But let me say this. I bought them in Monroe, down Route 4 to the church. And that's roughly about 10 minutes. I guarantee you I had 6 of those suckers eaten by the time I pulled in the parking lot. Hey, I got a lot done. That and a Coke, okay? But what we need to do with that goal is we need to make it meaningful so that we can reach it. And it means something. And not only meaningful, it's got to be maintainable. There are some times that we try to do things, and what ends up happening is, oh man, they took my clock off at the back wall. That's cool. So I have no idea what time it is. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. So anyway, Matthew chapter 12, verse 43 through 45. Okay, look at this. When an unclean spirit comes out of a person, it roams through waterless places looking for rest, but doesn't find any. Then it says, I'll go back to my house that I came from. Returning, it finds the house vacant, swept, and put in order. Now look, the next verse, 45. Then it goes in and brings with it 7 other spirits more evil than itself. They enter and settle down there. As a result, that person's last condition is worse than the first. That's how it will also be with this evil generation. And what we find is this. If you sit there and you say, okay, I'm going to make this habit, and I clean everything up and I don't do anything, what ends up is the habit comes back. And what it finds is it finds an empty house because it never substituted it with anything. And when it comes back 7 times worse. That's why sometimes when people give up, they give up. And so what ends up happening is this. If we learn to replace it with something, then we can learn how to eat the frog. So how do we do this? couple things. And that is this. We got to do some habit switching. Okay? When we looked at this, he said, when it came back, it was 7 times worse. What it means is this. If you're trying to get rid of a bad habit, you need to replace it with a good habit. If you don't replace it with something, it's coming back with vengeance. And so you've got to switch something out, okay? There was a book that was written back in the 1970s. I hear people say all of the time, addiction is bad, addiction is bad, addiction is bad. There is a thing that is called positive addiction. There are some things in our life, if we become addicted to it, it is positive. Prayer is one of them. Serving the Lord is a very positive addiction. Okay? It's not bad for you. It only gets bad for you is if the reason that you're serving the Lord becomes to get something. Not a reward, but a personal return of yourself to make you feel good. You've got to learn that addiction's okay if I'm doing it for the right reason. Okay? And it is for instance, how many of you all, being honest, complain too much? Right? Just complain too much. So what you try to do is you try to do some habit switching. Instead of complaining too much, start you a journal. A compliment journal. That basically says this. Instead of me writing down, today I went to the grocery store. There's too many people there, not enough cashiers. They didn't have what I wanted, and this and this and this and this and this. And I wrote this all down, just one complaint after another, after another, after another. Instead, I ran into someone that was having a hard day. And all I said to them was, hey, I'm praying for you. And they just broke down and said, you know what that means to me right now? So instead of writing all of the complaints that was going on in my life, I write down my journal, a compliment. Today, I met someone in the parking lot that was having a bad day. And all I said, Lord, was I'm praying for him. And it just brightened their day. Thank you, Lord, for allowing that person to come into my life. I needed that. And so what happens is, now instead of a habit of complaining all the time, now I've got a habit of looking for things that are positive, that are lifting me up instead of tearing me down. And so what am I doing? I'm doing habit switching. Okay? And then the last thing is called habit stacking. And let me give you a place to read, okay? And just write it down. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 6. And when you go home, read chapter 6, verses 4 through 9, okay? And here's what it says. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your might. Keep these words that I'm commanding you today in your heart. Okay? Keep these words in your heart. But he doesn't stop there. Recite them to your children and talk about them when you are at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you rise up. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead, and write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Now you know why the Jewish people have little boxes that have all of the verses in the boxes on their forehead. They were commanded to remember these things, recite these things over and over and over again. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, remember these things, but don't just remember them, recite them. Tell them to your children. Children, when you go home, tell it to the people at home. This is called a habit stacking. I'm stacking these things up on top of each other, on top of each other, and on top of each other. And when I do that, ladies and gentlemen, I can eat the whole frog. Because I've learned to do it one step at a time and being blessed instead of trying to do everything at once. And God is trying to tell us that when we try to do this, it will not work. So, it's like when you go and you walk into a place and you want a job. It's time for invitation. It's like when you want to get a job, you can't just walk in there and say, hey, I want a job, and they say, okay, you're hired. You got to fill out an application. Because if you don't fill out an application, you don't get the job. And so what we've got to learn to do, ladies and gentlemen, is take the proper step to do what it is that we're required to do. If you don't do it, you're never going to eat the frog. It ain't going to happen. If at the very beginning of this lesson or this sermon, if I told you, okay, every one of you, I got a frog and I'm going to give it to you and you're going to eat it, you'd look at me like I'm stupid. What would happen is I would walk out of here and I would have about 25 frogs jumping all around. Okay? And they would all still be intact, probably. Okay? But if we learn to do this one step at a time, we can win the day. We can learn that our life really isn't as bad as we make it out to be all the time. People would look at us as Christians and say, you know what? There's something about them that I need. Their life isn't everything going straight or going right. But look at them. They're able to cope. They're able to do things that are there. So this morning as we stand, as we sing, I ask you this question. What are you going to do with your life?